Okay, thanks very much, Fiona, and thanks for the opportunity to present on the Talking Hope project at the CYCJ conference. CYCJ have been a partner from the start. They're in with the bricks of the Talking Hope project, and we've had great support along the way, so thanks for that. We already had a workshop yesterday on Talking Hope, so we've tried to slightly change the content for today, and we would also like to just do a plug for our workshop this afternoon. The workshops had a bit of a different focus. It's our opportunity during the conference to test out some of the content of the Talking Hope toolkit, so we would really welcome people who are interested in finding out more, who might like to give us some opinions, because we're still developing the toolkit. It's not finalised yet. So just to switch to the PowerPoint slides now, Dave, if you could load them up. I'm going to do the kind of broad overview, and Dave's going to do more of the content of the toolkit. So we'll just start by, well, first of all, to say, so I'm Emma Miller. I'm a Senior Research Associate at Social Work and Social Policy at Strathclyde. And David Anderson is the researcher on the Talking Hope project. And as I say, he's going to tell you a bit more about the toolkit shortly. So if we go on to the next slide. So the origins of Talking Hope, this was a conversation really a few years ago at Strathclyde University between CYCJ and Social Work and Social Policy and other colleagues, wanting to progress some work around secure care at that time and looking at how to improve outcomes for young people facing vulnerabilities through increased voice and inclusion in decision making. And it was a social innovation project. So we had to come up with a theme that we could produce some kind of tool or toolkit. So the conversation kind of led us to thinking about the importance of conversation and about what happens when young people are deemed to be at high risk. The conversation can get a bit fixated on risk and how to manage risk, and that the strengths of the young person and their hopes can get lost a bit in amongst all of that. So switching the focus to hope, but also conversations between everybody involved. So conversations between practitioners and young people, but also conversations between practitioners in different agencies too. So that's where the concept of Talking Hope came from. And initially back in 2018, we got funding through the EU Social Innovation Fund. And that was to get the project started, develop proof of concept, etc. We were also funded by Scottish Government. However, obviously then we had Brexit, so we had to find alternative sources of funding to take the initial ideas forward, and Scottish Government and the Good Shepherd Centre funded that phase 2 in 2019. So our partners at that time were Ayrshire and Arran CAMS, East Ayrshire Health and Social Care Partnership, Good Shepherd Centre, and as I've said, the colleagues at Strathclyde University. So they still are partners in phase 3. So we had a bit of a lull there during the pandemic for a couple of years where there was no activity around Talking Hope, but we had lots of stuff sitting around, stuff that we'd gathered from young people and from our partners in the early phases. So we got some funding agreed from Scottish Government this time and Includem, and the project started, phase 3 started in October of last year, and we're just about to conclude, although the toolkit itself I think will take a little bit longer to finalise, but we're well on the way with it. And our new partners at this time are St Mary's and Rossley Secure Care Centres, as well as Includem, Foxgrove Secure Adolescent Inpatient Service, and a colleague from Edinburgh University too. And I noticed that Ian talked a lot about the importance of partnership and collaboration. And this project is fundamentally based on the importance of partnership and collaboration, as you'll probably see as we go through the presentation. Next slide, please, Dave. So that's just a kind of visual representation of all of those partners. Next slide, please. So I guess it's helpful just to think a little bit about hope as a concept in a word, because I think it's a really interesting word to talk about in service context. It's actually not a word that we use very often. And so it can be quite interesting even just to start having a conversation about hope and introduce the word and get people thinking about it and the role of their work in relation to hope. But if we take a step back further than that and think about the sort of theory around hope, The main theory of hope is from Snyder from the 1990s, and Snyder argues that hope is about setting goals. So it's about the setting of the goals, but it's also about identifying pathways to achieving them. So it's not just saying what is important to you, but actually what are we going to do? What's the action? How are we going to work together to get there? And so there's some really important links there to a sense of agency for young people and for families, actually, the importance of voice and how that links to identity. And we found in this phase that people have made strong connections with the Lundy model of participation. So that's the kind of core theory around hope, but there's some criticism of Snyder for not giving enough attention to the way social context can shape possibilities for hope, the situations that people find themselves in, like we just saw in that video there, and how that can affect hope and hopeful thinking. And actually, one of the things that we found most strongly, and you'll not be surprised to hear this at all, given the content of the conference over the past couple of days, is that how relationships impact on hope as well. And if we even go back to Erikson, child development theory, and about the emotional element of hope being rooted in early experiences of trust and trust in relationships, and how that's influenced by others and by external events. So these are all important concepts underlying our understanding of hope. If we move on to the next slide, Dave. And again, just by coincidence, linking back into what Ian was saying about the importance of interagency relationships has been one of the most important themes from the very start of the project, is about the importance of working together to, I suppose, as much maintain staff hope as young people hope. And something about the importance of conversation. I think that conversation is not really always as valued as it might be, but it's so important to make space for conversation so that we're not operating on the basis of assumptions. And sometimes that means that conversations can be challenging because we're bringing assumptions, but that's okay. But also something about that interagency working in terms of combining the knowledge, skills and experience that everybody brings to the table, and how that can be a powerful antidote to hopelessness. So this is a practitioner saying, when you feel you're losing hope, and the other worker said, oh, I was thinking about trying this, something else, and you to try, and you think, oh, I hadn't thought of that before. Right, let's get that in place. Let's try that. So there's something about when your energy is depleted, about the need to be linking in with others to get that renewal. And I guess there's something really important in there as well about how when you have people working around a young person with a shared sense of purpose and a shared sense of what is important to that young person and how that drives decision making, the really important signals that sends to them about hope for them. Next slide, please, Dave. So just some very broad themes that have been consistent through all three phases of the project. But again, nothing new to anyone in this conference, but it's always worth repeating that relationships are key to all aspects of having, building and maintaining hope, and that the conversations are the building blocks of those relationships. And I think something that's developed more in phase 3, Dave will say a bit more about this in a minute, is about communication, language and understanding. And I think it's great to see so much great work going on in Scotland just now around speech and language and the importance of communication support for young people and what a difference that can make. Also, just to mention well-being, again, repeating what has been said in the last two presentations about how important well-being is. And I guess there's something in here about coming through the pandemic, about well-being for young people, but equally well-being for staff, and how our toolkit is really being designed to support both. Also something to say about goal setting, and the importance of this is something that many of the young people we've spoken to, as well as the staff, have said, actually this is relevant to families as well, is about the importance of setting out manageable and achievable steps, of not setting the bar too high and setting people up to fail being really important. So there may be outcomes in the longer term, but it's those small steps towards getting there. The importance of a strength-based approach, and some of our materials are designed to help to embed that strength-based practice. Again, the importance of voice, agency and identity. And finally, something about the importance of belief. So I guess with hope, we found a few times, particularly in the early phases, that some people were a bit skeptical of the concept of hope in case it was a religious agenda that we had. So we had to do a little bit of work around that, and actually bringing in the concept of belief maybe won't help, because hope and belief really do sound a bit evangelistic. However, where hope is coming, a belief is coming in this phase 3, is a very strong sense that what practitioners say, they need to believe that they are able to make a difference in order to have hope. And young people say they need to, and families too, say they need to believe that change is possible in order to have hope. So I guess that ties back into action and the importance of working together to shared purpose. And at that point, I'll hand over to yourself, Dave, to tell everybody more about the toolkit.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Emma. So I'll just move on to the next slide. So yeah, as Emma was saying, we've been developing this toolkit as part of the project, really because phase 1 and phase 2 of the project highlighted that, you know, while staff working in the care sector are really committed and professional, the work can be very challenging and sometimes staff need support. And so as Emma's already highlighted, and I've just realized we've got a little duplicate quote here, but you know, it is about recognizing that no one person or agency, including us, has all the solutions. So the toolkit's really to try and bring together different examples from different organizations, different ways of working, and share them so that everyone can benefit from that exchange of knowledge and resources, because there's just been so many examples of creative work that's happening within our partner organizations. So yeah, it's really just to try and bring these together so that everyone can have a look at these within one place, and also provide those resources for staff. And obviously resuming work after the pandemic, I think it became even more clear that, you know, the events of the past 2 years have very much affected staff energies and hope and the landscape within the care sector, and that includes recruitment and retention of staff. You know, I think a few organisations have mentioned that they've been struggling to find new staff, you know, because of the sort of general environment that people have been finding themselves in recently. Saying that, you know, our partner organisations also highlighted that their staff have risen above and beyond doing the work that they were doing to support young people and each other throughout the pandemic. So there's a couple of quotes here just from one of our partner organizations, and, you know, they're just saying that, you know, where it has been such a really dark, horrible time, actually hope must have been there for everyone to kind of pull together, have each other's backs, and really, really care about the families that they work and still be going out and still going into houses. And again, the second one just highlighting that there were bits of creativity that people saw coming out from the work that teams were doing throughout the pandemic, you know, when they had to adapt working practices, when they had reduced peer support, when it was very challenging in new ways on top of the existing challenges of doing work. And, you know, you still had that kind of almost hope that people were finding in the creative ways that they were working around that. So in a way, the toolkit is also looking at situations like the pandemic and the work that was happening through that, and just trying to think of the small silver linings that you might gather from something like this event. And, you know, that although it was a trying time, there was a lot of creativity, a lot of empathy that was demonstrated by staff. And although this doesn't hide the need for more support for staff, you know, it's just that the toolkit could be offered as one way of providing that additional support. So what I'll do is I'll basically give you a very quick run through of some of the 3 key areas that we're looking at within the toolkit, and just discuss what we'll be including within them. So the key themes that we've identified from just building on the observations from the first 2 stages of the project and the findings as well. You know, it's these 3 main ones that you see here: meaningful participation, hopeful transitions, which we might be rewording to perhaps connections, but for now, hopeful transitions, and hopeful leadership. And so the plan is that we're going to host this on the Talking Hope website. And as we noted, the majority of this is going to be practice examples that we're drawing from our partner organizations. So, you know, they're kind of real world examples of how to find, build, and maintain hope that are already happening. People are already doing these. So it's really connecting back to that quote that we've had in here twice because it was so good, about, when somebody's maybe feeling a bit stuck or they're looking for a bit of hope, that they can look at the work that someone else is doing and, maybe gather some inspiration from that. So it's about bringing these resources together. So we'll have those examples and suggestions of how to make working practices more hopeful within each of these key themes, and some links to other existing online resources which can support these particular examples of practice. And then also just some images and quotes from young people and staff that we've spoken to throughout the sort of length of the project. So moving on to the first key theme is meaningful participation, and this is about strength-based recording, basically around sort of strengthening participation for young people and families, giving them more sort of agency within the work that's happening there. So it can be on meetings, on reflections from care experienced young people. It's also on improving communication and understanding and finding new ways of talking about language. I'm sorry, I'm running out of time a little bit. So somebody stop me if you have to. I will just run very quickly through the last two. So hopeful transitions is the next one. So building and maintaining, in fact, a hope reservoir to help people get through points of transition. And this doesn't just mean moving between care placements, which is often the word that transitions is used in terms of, but also meaningful life events. And this can be for both staff and young people. And finally, hopeful leadership, which is basically looking at how to provide extra support for the staff who are responsible for supervision, or providing peer support for staff within organizations. And this is to really address the sort of, issues of compassion fatigue, or as we were just describing earlier, the sort of difficulties that have arisen from the pandemic, and just about helping staff to manage challenging day-to-day circumstances, and also resources to sort of support when, for instance, maybe personal events are bleeding into work life, and how this can affect working practices. And again, looking at interagency working and partnership working, and how this can play a part in building more hopeful outcomes for people. Okay, apologies for having to rush through very quickly there. As Emma said, we are hosting a workshop later, but we'll talk a little bit more about the toolkit. So I think I will finish up there.
David, thank you so much. And I think we have put your website in the chat and the Twitter. So if anyone wants to contact you, as well as see your email addresses there, then they can do. So Emma and David, thank you so much for sharing